Right now, as you watch this video, over 1,400 Chinese missiles are pointed at a single island, smaller than the state of Maryland. That island produces more than 90% of the most advanced computer chips on the planet. If those factories stop for even 1 week, the global economy loses an estimated $1.6 trillion. Two nuclear power superpowers are threatening each other over this place, and most people can't even find it on a map. This is the story they never put in the textbook. This is History Lens. Let me take you back to where it all started. Long before any European ship appeared on the horizon, Taiwan was home to indigenous Austronesian peoples who had been living on the island for at least 6,000 years. They were not a single tribe, but dozens of distinct groups, each with their own language and customs, spread across mountains, plains, and coastlines that stretched the entire length of the island. Chinese fishermen from Fujian province occasionally visited the western shores for trade, but no mainland dynasty had ever formally governed the place. For centuries, Taiwan existed outside the reach of empires, known to sailors but claimed by nobody. That changed in 1624 when the Dutch East India Company, arguably the most powerful corporation on Earth at the time, built Fort Zeelandia on the southwestern coast. The Dutch saw Taiwan as a perfect hub between China, Japan, and Southeast Asia, and they wasted no time turning it into a full colonial operation. They taxed indigenous communities, imported Chinese laborers to farm sugarcane and rice, and constructed a network of forts and trading posts across the region. Then, in 1626, Spain seized the northern tip of the island and built Fort San Domingo, refusing to let the Dutch monopolize Pacific trade routes. For a brief and bizarre moment in history, two European empires were splitting a single island in the western Pacific, thousands of miles from either homeland. The Dutch eventually pushed Spain out by 1642, but their own grip on Taiwan was about to end in spectacular fashion. In 1661, a man named Zheng Chenggong, known in the West as Koxinga, arrived with roughly 400 warships and 25,000 soldiers. He was half Chinese and half Japanese, a Ming dynasty loyalist who had lost mainland China to the Qing and desperately needed a new base of operations. He surrounded Fort Zeelandia and laid siege for 9 grueling months, cutting off every Dutch supply line and starving the garrison into submission. In February 1662, the Dutch surrendered unconditionally. What makes this moment extraordinary is the scale of what Koxinga achieved. He expelled a European colonial empire from Asia at a time when virtually no one else on the continent had managed to do the same. He established the Kingdom of Tungning on Taiwan and governed it as an independent Ming loyalist state, building it into a base for the eventual reconquest of the mainland. But he never got the chance to carry out that plan. He died of malaria just months later at the age of 37, and his kingdom lasted only 2 more decades before the Qing dynasty finally conquered it in 1683. Under Qing rule, Taiwan was treated as a remote backwater that Beijing barely wanted to manage. The island was loosely administered as a part of Fujian province, and official migration from the mainland was restricted for years, though illegal settlers poured in regardless. The indigenous population was gradually pushed into the mountainous interior as Chinese farmers claimed the fertile western plains for themselves. Conflicts erupted constantly between settler groups, between settlers and indigenous peoples, and between just about everyone and the Qing government. There was a saying at the time that captured it perfectly. Every 3 years, a minor revolt. Every 5 years, a major one. Taiwan was a frontier that nobody in Beijing wanted to govern, but nobody was willing to surrender either. Everything changed in 1895. After losing the First Sino-Japanese War, the Qing dynasty signed the Treaty of Shimonoseki and handed Taiwan over to Japan without consulting a single person on the island. Some local leaders declared the Republic of Formosa in a desperate attempt to resist the takeover, but the new republic collapsed within months once Japanese troops landed in force. What followed was 50 years of Japanese colonial rule that reshaped the island from the ground up. Japan modernized Taiwan aggressively, building railways, schools, hospitals, and a functioning legal system. They introduced modern agriculture, built sugar and camphor industries, and made the island economically productive in ways the Qing never had. But all of that modernization came wrapped in forced cultural assimilation and systematic discrimination. Taiwanese people were made to speak Japanese in schools, pressured to adopt Japanese names, and treated as second-class subjects in their own homeland. The infrastructure Japan built was impressive, but it was built to serve the empire, not the people who actually lived there. When Japan surrendered in August 1945 at the end of World War II, the Republic of China under Chiang Kai-shek took administrative control of Taiwan. Many Taiwanese initially celebrated, hoping that Chinese rule would bring liberation and self-governance. That hope did not last long. The new nationalist administration was riddled with corruption, and mainland officials immediately began seizing Japanese-era properties, monopolizing industries, and treating the local Taiwanese population with open contempt. Inflation spiraled out of control, the economy deteriorated, and resentment built steadily until it finally exploded. On February 27, 1947, government enforcement agents in Taipei beat a widow who had been selling untaxed cigarettes on the street. Bystanders confronted the agents, and the situation turned violent. The next day, on February 28th, soldiers opened fire on protesters in front of the governor's office. The killings ignited an island-wide uprising that spread to every major city within days. Chiang Kai-shek responded by sending troops from the mainland, and what followed was one of the bloodiest crackdowns in modern Asian history. The military killed indiscriminately. Students, doctors, lawyers, journalists, local leaders, anyone even suspected of opposing the government was rounded up and executed. Estimates of the death toll from the 228 incident range from 18,000 to 28,000 people. The government then imposed martial law, and it would remain in place for 38 consecutive years, the longest unbroken stretch of martial law in modern history. During the White Terror era that followed, at least 140,000 people were imprisoned for political offenses, and between 3,000 and 4,000 were executed. An entire generation of Taiwanese intellectuals, artists, and community leaders was systematically erased. While all of this was happening, Chiang Kai-shek was losing the Chinese Civil War on the mainland. By late 1948, he could see the end coming, and he made one of the most audacious decisions in modern history. On the night of November 30, 1948, under total secrecy, he ordered 774 crates of gold to be loaded onto military transport ships in Shanghai. The shipment contained roughly 2.27 million taels of gold, essentially the entire reserve of the Central Bank of China. Over the following months, additional shipments carried silver, foreign currency, and US dollars across the strait. When Chiang relocated his government to Taiwan on December 7, 1949, he brought approximately 1.5 million soldiers, officials, and refugees with him, along with enough stolen gold to fund a government in exile and stabilize a new currency from scratch. For the next several decades, Taiwan existed under Chiang's authoritarian rule and American military protection. The United States backed the nationalist government as the sole legitimate government of all China, and Taiwan held China's seat at the United Nations until 1971. When the General Assembly voted to transfer recognition to Beijing, Richard Nixon's historic 1972 visit to China accelerated Taiwan's diplomatic isolation, and by 1979, Washington had formally switched recognition to the People's Republic. The Taiwan Relations Act of that same year committed the United States to providing defensive weapons to Taiwan, but without officially recognizing it as a sovereign country, Taiwan was left in a diplomatic gray zone that it has never escaped. But something extraordinary happened during those decades of political isolation. Taiwan transformed itself from a poor agricultural backwater into one of the fastest-growing economies on the planet. Between the 1960s and 1990s, GDP growth averaged roughly 9% per year, making it one of the four Asian tigers, along with South Korea, Hong Kong, and Singapore. The foundations of that miracle were export manufacturing, heavy investment in education, and a government willing to bet big on technology. The single most important bet came in 1987 when a man named Morris Chang founded the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company with backing from the Taiwanese government. His idea was radical at the time. Instead of designing and producing its own chips, TSMC would serve as a dedicated foundry, manufacturing chips designed by other companies. That concept created an entirely new business model and gave TSMC a structural advantage that compounded over decades of relentless reinvestment. Today, TSMC produces over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductor chips, the kind that power everything from iPhones and NVIDIA AI servers to military guidance systems and autonomous vehicles. Taiwan as a whole accounts for more than 60% of global foundry revenue. This dominance has generated what analysts call the Silicon Shield, the idea that Taiwan's semiconductor industry makes the island too economically critical to attack. If China were to invade and those fabrication plants went offline, virtually every major technology company on Earth would be crippled within weeks, and some estimates suggest the global economy would lose over $1.6 trillion in the first year alone. But that shield may be developing cracks. TSMC is now investing $65 billion to build 3 massive fabrication plants in Arizona. The first factory began commercial chip production in late 2024 and started mass-producing advanced AI chips with NVIDIA by October 2025. A second factory is scheduled to begin production in 2027, ahead of the original 2028 timeline, and a third plant focused on the most cutting-edge 2-nanometer process is already under construction. If enough advanced production moves onto American soil, the economic argument against invading Taiwan becomes a little less compelling. Officials in Taipei have quietly expressed concern that their most powerful deterrent is being slowly relocated across the Pacific. China, for its part, is not waiting. In October 2024, after Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te's National Day speech, Beijing launched large-scale naval drills and war games near the island. In April 2025, an exercise called Straight Thunder simulated strikes on key ports and energy infrastructure. Then, in late December 2025, the People's Liberation Army conducted its most extensive military exercise to date, called Justice Mission 2025, simulating a full blockade of Taiwan with warships, fighter jets, and rocket forces deployed simultaneously on all sides of the island. The exercises lasted 2 days and were explicitly described by Chinese state media as a warning to separatist forces. There is a deep irony at the center of all of this. Taiwan has been governed by the Dutch, the Spanish, a half-Japanese pirate king, the Qing dynasty, Imperial Japan, a Chinese military dictatorship, and now a vibrant democracy that most nations on Earth refuse to officially recognize. It has been a colony, a kingdom, a neglected frontier, a Japanese province, an authoritarian state, and a global technology leader. Through every single one of those transitions, the people living on the island were never once asked what they wanted. The 23 million people of Taiwan have built one of the most advanced economies in Asia, created the semiconductor industry that powers the modern world, and survived over 400 years of foreign rule. Yet their country still does not hold a seat at the United Nations and cannot participate in the World Health Organization. They exist in a space that international law has no clean category for, recognized by fewer than 15 nations, but economically indispensable to all of them. The story of Taiwan is not just about geopolitics or semiconductors or military drills. It is about an island that has been passed from one empire to the next like a piece of property for 5 centuries, and the people who kept building, surviving, and innovating through every single handover. From the Austronesian tribes who lived there for thousands of years, to the engineers in white cleanroom suits who keep the global digital economy running today, Taiwan has always been far more than what outsiders try to make of it. And that story is still being written. Thank you for watching. This has been History Lens. If stories like this one change the way you see the world, hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what they left out of the history books.